Welcome everybody back to one of our farm walks. Today we're going to talk on forestry stroke agroforestry, or trees on the land. I'm down here on the farm with William Considine, very much extreme south. The Salty Islands are about a mile at the end of my finger here. And what's really interesting about this farm, and we decided to film this as part of the agroforestry series, is William has managed to integrate trees right into his farm, but not using the agroforestry scheme as much as using the normal forestry scheme. So I'm kind of intrigued, William, to see how you managed to do this, because it's maybe a simple solution.
Yeah, I think it is a simple solution. I had, as I said, 100 acres here of bare ground, very few trees except a few trees around the house. That was all that was here. My neighbour's land, no trees either. We're very exposed. That direction is Hookhead, so when the wind comes in that direction, we're getting it straight from Hookhead, and it scorches trees. It scorches grass. It can do a lot of harm. And I saw it especially in growing some maize back in the 1990s, and I saw the effect of the shelter of the ditch on the maize. The maize grew at least a metre high close to the ditch than it did out in the field. So that convinced me that some shelter would definitely improve the farm, would allow greater diversity of cropping, would allow to do other things other than beef or dairy, which was the only possible use of it previously. So I looked at the farm, and the southwesterly end of it is down there. That's the bit that's closest to the Salties, I suppose. I decided I would plant up to a half the farm, 50%, and I put it in belts around. This belt behind us is 40 metres of conifers. 40 metres is the recommended minimum width for forestry plantations. So along this boundary, I put Sitka spruce, because I was advised that that was the only species that could grow at this exposure here. In the lower ground down below, I planted a lot of broadleafs, mainly alder, which we can talk about again. And the idea was to create shelter around the fields that are remaining. Also, between the blocks of fields like this one and the next one, there's a small block of plantation, and other parts of the farm there's blocks within the land as well. So that every field almost has forestry around it, and that's the objective.
Okay, so you're going to have a timber resource, and we'll talk a little bit more about the different uses, but also you're allowing cattle or sheep. Is it cattle and sheep you graze, or just cattle?
No, sheep, just cattle at the
just
moment.
cattle.
Yeah.
And in terms of livestock, your cattle are right. We're here in the first week in April, and cattle are comfortably out. Has the trees had an impact on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely have an impact on it. Yeah.
And winter additional grass in the spring.
Correct. Yeah. I definitely see the effect, and the comfort of the animals is also very evident. You know, towards having their backs hunched up, they can operate fairly normally in the field.
And then you've a breed change as well, haven't you? It's all Angus, is it? From here, I'm looking at.
Correct. Yeah. All
so
Angus,
they have that extra hairy coat, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, they're yeah. The mothers are half Frisian, half Angus, but they're hardy enough. We're kind of limited in this land. This is what I should say. This is a heavy Rattangan soil. It's a famous soil. It's a heavy clay soil, and it's marginal for tillage. You know, we have grown tillage here, good crops of sugar beet in the past. Only average cereals, but it's marginal for tillage. It's a short growing season under traditional arable systems anyway. So, and it was known as a wet farm in an area of wet farm. So it had some natural disadvantages like that as well. And another thing, the trees, I mean, in theory, the roots of these trees behind me should be extending out at least the height of these trees out, and they should be drawing moisture from that. They should be loosening the soil in that. I call it kind of a permanent subsoiling system, that the roots doing their job out there should loosen up the soil. I mean, I can't say that it's extremely noticeable. I wouldn't, but theoretically it has to be there. It has to be doing something, you know. So that's another benefit as well.
Yeah, and How old is this plantation?
That's 2006 it was planted, so it's just 14 years
Okay,
old.
so as a shelter belt, it gets there pretty quickly. In
Very
real
quickly.
estate, yeah.
And that's why I came up here. I know a lot of people are negative about Sitka spruce. And I don't like to see whole townlands planted with Sitka spruce. I think nobody does. But the tree itself is not its fault. It's how it's used is the fault. It loves Ireland. You can see here these trees, they've done really well here in an exposed site. And it has its uses. Here, it can act as if I was doing it again, and I suppose we can talk about that, if I was doing it again, I would put a belt of Sitka right around the whole farm. At the time, I didn't like Sitka, as most people don't, and I wanted as many broadleafs as possible. But we don't know enough about how broadleafs will grow in different types of soil, in different farms, in different areas and exposures. So it's very much a learning curve.
Well, we're in here inside in your 40-meter forestry section, and the first thing you notice is it's so much warmer in here. It is a completely different climate, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So how old are these trees again?
These are 14
years
old, yeah. Yeah.
Like, I suppose, looking at it from a farming perspective, I would think that, particularly, and if you look at how farming works, we'll say the biggest cost associated with, we'll say, beef production is probably housing. I could see animals would be quite comfortable over the winter in here.
Yeah, very comfortable.
But you're still within a grant system, so I don't know, where does this operate? Are you allowed cattle integrated that when the trees are this size?
My understanding is that no.
Right.
But I've heard various things, and on paper, I think the answer is
well,
no.
maybe at the conference this is something that we could thrash out in the sense of, is particularly, for example, is what would the risks be? Like, animals aren't going to damage.
No, I mean, well, for a start, they wouldn't be going to get food in here. As you can see, there's no greenery gets under the Sitka spruce, so it's not a matter of food. But I could definitely see a standoff pad, wood chipped standoff pad for wintering of cattle and bring silage to them to here. I could see that as a potential use.
But could it be that you wouldn't even need a pad, that the animals could exist comfortably loose in a woodland like this? Like, we had one at home ourselves years ago, not unlike this, but it was only a shelter belt area, and for years we had kept the cattle inside in it. And I always remember the cattle were much healthier.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you often see that with outdoor reared animals. They're much healthier, they've better hair on them and everything else.
Definitely.
But also sheep. I think sheep would be in heaven in here.
Yeah, I guess they would. I mean, they go as long as they could go out to the field beside to get their grass and come back in here. Yeah. I mean, it's a matter of intensity. It's a matter of how many animals, and that's the key thing.
Yes,
and I think that's why the department are hesitant, because somebody put 60 cattle in here, and they would wreck the place. Somebody putting 5 cattle over the winter in a hectare of land, probably wouldn't do much harm at all, So this is why it's hard to regulate, and I feel for the department in that kind of thing.
And then I suppose if you take it a step further and you can say, well, if you had the space and if you reduce the trees by 8 or 10-fold for an agroforestry situation where you could get the benefit of both worlds.
Correct.
That you could have a canopy, it's some people call it farming the Z space, and in this up here where you'd have a slight canopy cover, and that you could graze comfortably here all year round.
Yes.
And theoretically, as you mentioned, there should be more water cycling, and we should effectively have drier land, but you would have sunlight penetrating the forest floor or the floor to generate grass.
Just as we're speaking, you're sparking something in my mind. I mean, under the Forestry Act, people who have planted, and me on this plantation here, if I clear fell, I don't intend to clear fell, I intend to operate a continuous cover, because the shelter is such a valuable part of this farm now that removing that shelter would actually be counterproductive. So this is the idea of continuous cover, is that you never clear fell, so you keep the shelter forever.
So is this like continuous thinning over a period, is it? Or
continuous covers mean you all have a mixed aged and a mixed species plantation. So, and you take out the best tree when you want them. You can take some out every year basically, or whenever
Okay.
you need, you go in and take them out.
So would you be reducing the canopy all the time then?
Yeah, well, this is the point I was
Yes.
coming at. You just triggered that idea for me in that the department probably could maybe make it an option at the end of, we'll say, the first rotation, that people could not stock it as densely with trees and to have agriculture, have animals in among the trees. That is a possibility. I don't know, but a department would have to think about that.
Yeah,
obviously.
because and that might be a solution for some of the poorly afforested sites. You know, where trees without giving out about sick as spruce, it's often where they're planted, as we said earlier, wrongly. That maybe that's a long-term plan could be that a continuous cover option could be where you'd slowly reduce the canopy down, that animals could be integrated back into those systems.
Yes, and also the shelter well idea, whereby you allow the Sitka, because it is a tremendous colonizer, and then you take out shelter wells. You could take out a 10-meter circle here, and you could put in oak, you could put in broadleaves, high-value broadleaves.
Or cattle.
Pardon?
Or cattle.
Or cattle. I'm saying
It does open up endless options.
It opens up. Some of the rigidity has to be go out of it, and farmers have to be given empowered basically to follow their own intuition and their own learning on these things. You know.
Yeah. And yes, absolutely. And I think one of the concerns you will find is that people are worried is if you pay farmers to plant trees, that after the period runs out, that they decide to take down those trees. But the reality is slightly different, I think. I think that, you know, if the value is on the tree, and in agroforestry you nearly have to separate the ground the tree is sitting on, or the field that the trees are sitting on, because half of that has to be permitted for livestock production or horticulture or tillage or whatever it is going to be. And that when we design systems like that, we can't have that rigidity. It has to be a little bit more flexible.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, trees benefit, I think, they definitely benefit animals, they definitely benefit crops, they benefit glasshouses, they benefit almost anything you can think of that you can use land for. Because they introduce the third dimension. As I say, we look at land as a hectare, which is 100 meters by 100 meters. We never look at the vertical axis. And the vertical axis up there is catching a huge amount of photosynthesis, which otherwise, that radiation, not in this specifically spot, but certainly in a broadleaf cover, light that's reflected from the ground level gets caught by the leaves higher up and is harvested in. So we are light harvesters. That's what farmers are. We're light harvesters, and anything we can get to do to trap more light and turn it into carbohydrate by photosynthesis, we should be allowed to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's
okay. So listen, we still didn't get to the maples.
No,
let's go to the maples. William, we're here now in the Maplewood. Not the norm, I suppose, is it?
No, not the norm. No, it's Norway maple, and I said I'd try some. I wanted to try and see what trees would do best on the farm. I did like to see broadleaves, especially, and the maple is a good wood. So this is Norway maple here.
So, and it's grown pretty well.
It's not too bad. It's a bit branchy, but you will find you have to look for good straight stems enough, you know. But hopefully it will come to in time.
And again, is with my agroforestry thinking on is it something that probably isn't that far off that if rules allow that you could graze or you could allow cattle in here?
Well, I'm just 5 meters from a grass field there beside us, you know. So when this has gone through its thinnings, and when the final cropping trees are identified and maybe protected, then I think it should be allowable to come in, utilise the vegetation and the grass that's underneath here.
And it's a brighter, lighter canopy, so I take it you have more Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, of course, the leaves are not come, but
Yeah.
the maple is fairly, as you can see from
Yeah.
the floor. There's not much grass there. The maple does cover very at this density. I mean, when they're thinned out, there will be more light will get down. But
Yeah.
at this density, not much light gets down there.
And in terms of, we'll say, uses, not just maple, but other plants, is by having some of this, you could probably experiment with more ideas as well, on what could be maybe valuable enterprises on a farm.
Maple syrup is an obvious one, and there is no reason why maple syrup can't be produced in Ireland. No reason at all.
And would it be from Norway maple now, is it? Or can you do it from Norway maple?
Any maple, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. I thought it was yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there may be quality differences and variations, but you can also do it from alder, you can do it from birch, you can harvest the syrup from many fruit trees.
Okay.
And yeah.
Is that the tapping system? I know
it's the tapping system.
You hear it in birch as birch water and stuff. Is that the?
It's the tapping system.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And it would be done around this time of the year, before the trees come in leaf, after frost. We've had some close to frost now lately, so it could be done. You know, it's a matter of labour. It's a matter of putting a market together for a product like that and going after it. You know.
And then, like I would have thought, and I read somewhere recently where, and I see some young nettles coming up that, from a feed perspective, they're actually quite good for hens.
Oh yeah.
And that something like this could be the perfect, because they are a woodland animal.
Absolutely.
That's particularly something like this could be a really useful habitat for birds.
Absolutely, yeah. Somebody coming in there now. Sorry.
Okay, so it's not a huge area. No.
But just to recap what I've said earlier, you don't realise the potential when you actually plant. It's only later, when the canopy gets to this stage, or to the one that we were previously in, that you start to see, oh yeah, there's potential here for that. So I see it as wealth building, in adding this third dimension to your farm. You're building wealth, you're building resilience for the future. That forestry out there, I mean, worst came to the worst, you can sell timber from that, you know, in the future, if really hardship or a famine situation, or something really terrible. So you're building resilience and interest also. What I often say and I probably will say it at the conference as well, is that as farmers, we deal with only the first metre. We watch from bare ground in the spring, and our eyes go up to a metre high, maybe if it's maize 2 metres high, but in around that, and then back down again the following year. So every year you're following this plateau. And forestry, you're up there one year, you're up there another year, up there another year, and before you're looking up.
Yeah.
It changes your perspective completely. And I think that's something that a lot of farmers could do with, because going like this every year, after 30 or 40 years, it's drudgery, and it becomes drudgery, and it tells on farmers. Plant trees. I think old foresters tend to be happy. I haven't seen a miserable one yet, to be honest. Yeah.
At the conference. I'm only joking. I also see Scots pine. Is it?
Scots pine, yeah. Correct. Yeah.
They're a lovely tree.
A lovely tree, and having a mix of trees, and there's larch over there and there's birch over there. I mean, having a mix is important. You know, definitely not get away from the monoculture, because they all bring something to the party, and the synergies between them, and you know, it's important, and for us as well.
Yeah, William, we're here now with the other end of the business, the livestock. Predominantly Angus, is it?
Yeah, my mothers are half Angus, half British Frisian, to get a bit of milk into them, and then I put a AI Angus on those again.
Okay, so
what I sell is 3/4 Angus.
3/4, and that gets in the organic system. You're close to Slaney here, so you probably get a decent premium now on those.
Yeah. So far, it has been a good premium. Yeah.
And you're fully grass fed, aren't you? It's
fully grass fed.
Yeah.
Fully grass.
In the real sense of the word.
In the real sense of the word.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And again, I suppose that maybe is an advantage of having this forestry around the thing, is you get to grass that little bit earlier in the spring, but also probably gets a little bit to stay out a little bit later.
Yeah, and there's also the browsing potential. It had, I mean, I think it was 3 years ago, was it, or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we had a very bad drought in the summertime. And that line of birch you see behind the cows there, I was able to lop down branches down to them, and they devoured them, you know.
It's amazing, something we often forget about.
We often forget that cows are not just grazers, they're potential browsers as well. And actually it's good for their health to browse. And I've taken to giving them ivy as often as I can find it. I find and bring it into them, you know?
It's funny. My father always would have given ivy to sick sheep and stuff like that. Or there was that whole thing about we used to, as kids, we used to cut ivy off the branches and give it to sheep. Yeah.
Well, I understand it has vermicidal properties, so it does help to remove stomach worms from the animals. So, and not just ivy, but other woody leaves can do the same thing.
Yeah. And maybe that's it. That it's again that whole diversity. It's animals need that diversity of diet as much as anything else.
As much as anything, as much as we do, you know. And the other thing is that if you want to, and we should all try to get as close to the farm gate or as close to the consumer as possible. So if you can brand your finished product, your beef or whatever, and tag on to that the environmental good that you're doing on your farm, so that people are not just buying the beef, they're buying the story of the beef, they're buying the place it came from, they're buying the good feeling of, oh, this has been done nicely and this other creatures have benefited from it. So it's the whole story that we have to sell for beef, and I think that is the potential, because there's so much against beef from the other side. I always call them that for now. That we have to struggle and we have to be creative in finding ways to get people to still appreciate the high value food stuff that it is.
Absolutely, but also I think that, you know, maybe people would be less negative about beef if they seen them in a setting like this.
Absolutely. I think the CAFOs, as they call them, are the big selling point for the other side, you know. And certainly, I mean, any Irish person rebels against the huge cattle feedlots that you see in other parts of the world. You know, Irish beef is not produced like that.
No.
But people getting their information from the internet, they don't distinguish between American beef and Irish beef. And if they see something happening in one country, they assume that it's happening in every country.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. But also I think if we could work to integrate trees into farms, that you could still do, because at the heart of, for me, for agroforestry is that it allows farmers to stay on the land and farm while having trees as well. And it's that integration that's so important.
Absolutely, and from a generational point of view as well, just as you're speaking there, I'm thinking of other countries where forestry has been a route out of farming. In other words, the next generation leave farming, and they still keep the forestry, but they leave farming. Agroforestry would tend to keep both, because there's still the potential for animals and also a living environment. I mean, one of the things when I started to plant this place, I didn't want it just to be a farm to somebody. One thing I hate is derelict out farms, and there's lots of them around here, which were homes. There were families raised there. They're beautiful little spots, but now the land is gobbled up by somebody. The house and the buildings are left to crumble, and there's a sadness about that. Whereas if you put lots of trees around it and create diversity around it, somebody will want to live there. That's another plus as well, you know.
Yeah, and you know, I think maybe the future is much brighter for farming because
one other thing,
of outlets.
while we're here, you know, it can be faulted by people because I'm not doing agroforestry, as in putting trees in rows for alley cropping or alley silvopasture. And the reason is because we're so exposed here that you couldn't do that on bare land here. You must first of all get shelter there before you can get the trees to grow. But I look at that line of birch behind me, and I see the potential to build out trees into this field, you know, and even maybe utilizing the agroforestry grant that's there now If I can just decide on the best species, that's why my impediment at the moment, deciding the best species.
Yeah.
And then just start rows out from that, you know, and rows or even random trees out from that. So the interface between the forest and the agriculture, that is the most productive part of a farm, because you're getting insulation, light is being trapped by the high canopy of the trees and reflected down to the ground as well. So that there's a kind of a sun trap between the farmland and the tree layer. And in that triangle there is a whole lot of energy which is trapped and which can create a high productivity of various things in that. I mean, up there in another area, I have apple trees in a similar situation. Now they're on the exposed side of it, rather than here would be on the sheltered side of it. So there's potential everywhere.
Yeah,
once you start to plant trees, you see potential everywhere.
Yeah, and maybe we're only constrained by our own mindsets as much as anything else on this.
And they can't be rigid. They must be flexible and must be observant at all times, you know. Yeah. Definitely.
We're here now in one of the other sections, William, where you were talking about your alder not doing so well.
Yeah, this was a lower lying section of the farm, and I thought I could chance other things than Sitka spruce down here, and I wanted broadleaves. So at the time, I suppose oak was an option, but there was some poor oak stands around South Wexford. They would call it an oak dieback or something like that, but some farmers hadn't gone on well with oak. Ash was an option here too, and maybe it was lucky that I didn't go all ash here, because I could be looking at a very different problem here if I was all ash. At least I have live trees behind me, but they're not really doing extremely well in any sense of the word. But they are producing, they're doing what the alder is supposed to do. They're a colonizer. So they've colonized the soil for maybe higher value trees. So what I've done here is I've taken out one line of alder behind me here. And on this particular line, I've got cider apple trees. These are cider apples. And in between, they're at 6 meter spacing. And then in between 3 meter spacing, I've hazels. So again, I'm trying out to see how they will do here in this environment. And I can take out, if there's overhang or anything like that, or shade, I can take out alder from either side to favour the continuation of them.
Almost like a nurse crop.
Oh, it's like a nurse crop, exactly. And that's one way of utilising an alder plot like this. Another one is agroforestry, would be to leave the trees here and let the animals graze the abundant grass that there is underneath it here. And this is where I need to talk to the department about that, because
Because in a situation like this, you have lots of available grass and you still have the required spacing, but you have because it's an open canopy.
Correct. And when you go to first and second thinning here, I mean, there will be even more light and even more grass at the ground level. So that is one way, is to just allow it to be grazed and to keep as many trees here as you can and work away like that.
And this ground doesn't seem too wet, I have to say. Has the trees dried it, or was it? Do you know what I mean?
It's not spongy ground, but it is wet ground. We haven't had rain here for 10 days or so, so it's normally it would be wet. But the trees, the alder especially, I think probably does soak up quite a bit of moisture and does help to dry out the ground a bit, I think. You know.
Yeah, and I suppose the whole network of roots probably has an impact on that as well.
And the other thing that attracted me to alder is that they are also nitrogen fixers, that they live in symbiosis with the
microbes in the soil.
Yeah, microbes. I can't remember his name now, but so that will mean that helps the green grass on the ground as well. So it's another potential.
So walnut.
Yeah. again, there was no tradition of walnut growing
Yeah.
in this land, so I had to try and start off by walking to see, would it grow here and how it grows here. So it's doing okay in this situation. I put these ones here are beside the drain for extra drainage, and I have now found that maybe I didn't need the tube because the hair is my biggest problem here. The hair the apple trees below the hair was at them, and most oak, the hair will be at them. But I find he doesn't like the walnut tree. So
Interesting, isn't it?
so the tube is it's just a bit of land drainage pipe, and it was put there when we didn't know what the hares would do with it.
Yeah.
But now we know. That tree is about 3 years old, planted.
Okay, because it's doing quite well for 3 years.
It's doing quite well, yeah. Walnut is it's intermediate. It grows faster than oak, and it's grows quite well here. I'm very quite happy with it here.
Okay.
Actually. Yeah, yeah.
And I suppose maybe it's one of those trees that could fill the gap with where ash was going to be for a while now.
Absolutely, it's an ideal specimen tree, surrounded by grazing and grass, and you have the nuts could be fodder for pigs as well. I mean, we haven't mentioned the pigs.
Pigs, yeah.
We haven't mentioned the pigs, but they're another potential if you want to grab them by the tail and go with them.
Yeah.
Again, fencing is the big issue. I tried a few pigs there a few years ago, and they did great. They loved it in here, but they still wanted to be somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. No, and that is it. And I think there's a whole thing around, particularly in organics, where monogastric animals, the high cost of imported feed means that you have to come up with a solution that's forage based.
Yeah, well, mine got no purchase feed. They were solely fed on what they got here and some discarded potatoes I got from
That's why they wanted to leave, maybe.
What?
That's maybe why they wanted to leave.
They just wanted to leave to go into the grass field next door. They just wanted, and actually to be near you. They're very social creatures. So if you're up in the yard there, they want to be up there. Yeah, no, I will go at the pigs again. But again, it's a matter of time and focus, and you can't be focused on too many things.
No.
There's a need for more eyes per acre, I think, more people to be involved, Yeah,
observation has a lot to do with farming, isn't it?
And just people, hands-on people. So, line of walnut here, and I've got quite a lot of that now up here, and another plantation over there.
So, how many rows in between? Is it 6, is it? That you've left between, or is there?
It's 2 drains, so it's 6, yeah.
6, okay.
Yeah, 6.
So as these mature, and this will be more continuous forestry in a way, isn't it, that as these mature on, you'll probably be taking out the alders?
Yes. Yeah. And this particular plot, I would see this as possible potential alley cropping, if it was allowed, if conditions were right, that this would become the tree layer and that all the alder could be taken out, or maybe all bar some isolates and then graze between the.
Okay, so this will become almost like
it could be like an alley cropping situation.
An alley cropping agroforestry system.
In reverse, it comes from forestry to alley cropping rather than the other way around. So that potential is there as well. And that's quite a long belt there that continues on as far again as you can see there, right to the end. So.
Okay. And was this all predominantly alder? I know there's birch in the front.
There's only a bit of birch there just on the interface there, but no, it's monoculture alder, yeah. And I have tried to scatter seeds through it there, but none of them seem to have appeared. Scattered oak acorns and beech nuts and ash, but I can't say that any of them actually appeared. So far the Callara the individual trees have it, so it is here, but I think, I could be wrong now, but I think where ash is isolated, being within other species, it may not be as vulnerable as when it's in monoculture. I don't know.
Yeah, it's such a new disease, I suppose. We've a lot to learn on this, and I think it'll be interesting to see how it does occur.
Where you see ash in monoculture, it tends to be quite bad in it, whereas I don't have it here, so to the same extent.
And that was one of the subjects of our discussions was, could agroforestry be a solution, even in the short term, where there was issues with dieback from ash that you could allow it to be grazed with cattle as part of an overall management program. There is maybe some examples coming from with similar issues in other trees in other countries where diversity of species has meant that the disease, while is still there, is of lesser problems than having that monoculture.
Yeah.
Like almond fruits and stuff, like almond trees and stuff like that in other countries,
Yeah.
where it had been very much a commercial monoculture,
Yeah.
and that farmers have now diversified into different species, like rows of almonds, single rows of something else, and single rows of something else, and that the disease, while still in the soil or whatever, was not becoming an issue.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I think maybe there's a lot to be learned from that.
Diversity is the answer to many, many problems. No doubt about that. Yeah. No doubt about it. Biodiversity.
Biodiversity.
Yeah.
And that's where we might leave it. Yeah.
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 I think this has covered quite a bit today, and as part of the overall, I suppose, what William has done here is almost tweak our concept of what agroforestry is, and by utilising existing grants and being able to work this, I think in the future, and then it depends, of course, on you're getting the edge benefit from the livestock, and given where you were, you need to have boundary protection. But maybe in a longer term, depending on how the rules apply, you might be able to start integrating cattle into your into the forestry as part of that larger agroforestry integration.
Yes, and at the moment, I mean, the boundaries in my farm are reflected by boundaries in the Department of Agriculture.
Yes.
And that in here is the forestry section, and just a few yards away is the agri section.
Yes.
And I mean, that
Never
mindset has to be integrated as well, because to integrate it on the ground here, we must integrate it globally and mentally and everything else, you know. So,
no, it's interesting.
That rigidity has been a barrier.
Yeah.
I think it is breaking. I think it is breaking down.
I think and I think the role of trees in farming has to change, and they should be all part of that integration. I think that even whether it's forestry or individual trees or alleys, you know what I mean, there has been understanding that the whole farm has to work together.
Yeah, and trees can bring nothing but benefit. You know, the big machines find them as obstacles, but even big machines cannot get into corners, and corners can always be planted. And so it's a way of changing our minds a little bit.
Yeah, well, hopefully we're on the right track.
Hopefully.
Thanks very much, William.
All right, thank you, Sean. Thank you.